Hey there, horror movie tea sippers.
The following podcast episode will contain spoilers for the movie we are about to review. If you have not seen the movie and do not wish to have anything ruined prematurely, please do not continue to watch or listen until you have seen the movie.
And welcome to the Horror Movie Tea Podcast. Today, we are covering for the first week of Halloween, or October, The Bride of Frankenstein, the original from 1935. 1935. And I said I wasn't going to mess up, and I messed up anyways. And as you can see, we have Keith again on our episode, and we thought he would be a great start for October. So
happy Halloween.
Yes. The whole month of October.
Unseasonably hot for Halloween, I have to say. But.
Yes. It's like we love Halloween so much that we have to make it for the entire year.
Of course.
But before we go into the review, let's grab our cups and talk about tea. So I will go ahead and let Keith start us off. What tea are you drinking today?
Okay, so my tea today, it's actually the same brand as the last time I was with you, but that's coincidence. I mean, other brands are available. But it's the Good Earth brand from California, but this time a different flavour. This time it's pear and elderflower, which is a white tea, and I'm drinking it in my horror movie tea. Cheap plug for you. Come buy the merch. But I recommend it.
How do you like it?
I like it a lot.
Oh, good.
The mug's great and the tea's great. So.
Thank you.
Yes, we're so honored. But the tea I'm drinking is by Plum Deluxe. It's the Strawberry Honeysuckle Black Tea. It has black tea, strawberry pieces, raspberry leaf, calendula, and honeysuckle essence. And I am, the image might be reversed. Yeah, but it's the please don't kill me mug. So, what are you drinking, Jess?
I am drinking Bigelow's Mint Medley Herbal Tea, caffeine-free and all-natural. It has peppermint leaves, spearmint leaves, rosehip, lemon peel, and hibiscus.
You've been liking the mint teas lately.
Yes, and I am drinking it out of our I'm going to kill you at some point mug.
Which I will buy at some point.
I love it.
But thank you as always to Plum Deluxe for allowing us to continue to do what we love, and for our lovely tea sippers out there. Brew yourself a cup of tea, sit back, relax, and we hope you enjoy the review. So for the summary of The Bride of Frankenstein, it's pretty straightforward. It literally starts right after the first movie, and essentially, Dr. Frankenstein is goaded by an even madder scientist wanting to build Frankenstein's monster a mate. And so, that's all there is to it. So far, I can never make
summary.
it. Yeah, it's like I can never make it so normal.
I would have rambled on, but.
But it's like we like to keep the summary brief because I think at least for this movie, I think a lot of people know the title of the movie.
Quite famous.
Yeah.
The title sort of says it all in a way.
Yes.
It's been around a minute. I'm pretty sure people know what happened.
Yeah, it's almost 100 years old. Yeah. Which is crazy to think about. Like,
crazy.
Dang. But, so for entertainment, I would give this a 6.5 with the possibility of it being raised. But, I had never seen this movie before, and it definitely, this movie makes me want to like seek out the classics. Like it's a great movie. I love the atmosphere to it. The monster actually genuinely looks scary. Like the makeup that they used was pretty fantastic. And it just apparently there's a potential symbolism where the director apparently was homosexual, and it's thought that not just about the monster, like the contrast of the monster actually being more of the good guy, and then the townspeople that are trying to hurt the monster being the actual monsters in the film. It's also like this contrast of, or the theory is that it might be a representation of homophobia, where like the monster is maybe representing homosexuality and people at that time, outwardly trying to prevent it and stuff like that. And it's like I can see it, but I don't know if I can definitively say, oh, that's definitely the symbolism. Because it's like, in this type of situation, I think many people can identify being in a situation where they are socially not accepted for who they are. But I will say, though, there are a few things that I thought was a little strange, and it could be because the movie length itself isn't that long, so maybe they didn't have enough time to build it up. But it's like it's right after the tragedy, and Frankenstein is over here like, I'm never going to be like doing these experiments again. And then very shortly after, the crazier scientist goes up to him and be like, what if we get, your monster a mate? And he immediately is just like, yes. Just immediately jumps on board. But I will say I absolutely loved the moment with the monster and the blind man. Like, that is such a good scene. Like, I had watched Young Frankenstein, and I had no idea that they were actually taking scenes from The Bride of Frankenstein. And so we immediately recognized that scene. We're like, oh my God,
Yes.
it's a scene from Young Frankenstein. But that whole scene, though, is actually like very touching and yet very sad, but it's also heartwarming. Like it's a whole mixture of emotions. But I'm definitely very glad that I saw this movie. I will probably watch it again, and it's kind of opened the doors for me wanting to watch more of the old classics. So
Very nice. So I'll go next if you want.
yeah, sure.
Okay, cool. Okay, well, I didn't know about the homosexual angle, so that's interesting. That's not something I'd heard, but I can definitely see there's themes like that in this movie. So this was a rewatch for me, so I think that's why my score is a bit higher. I like this film a lot. I think if you're just talking like really great sequels, I think it's one of the best sequels maybe ever. That classic thing of take the premise of the original, the first film, and just run with it, and sort of you can tell it's a Frankenstein sequel, but it also does its own thing at times as well. And so for entertainment, I give it an 8.5. And so I think the only thing that stops me from going a bit higher is I think some of the stereotypes got a bit much at times, like the sort of gypsy stereotypes and just some of the hysteria with certain characters around the village. And
You didn't like the hysterical running?
That was
No.
so funny.
We laughed so hard. We laughed so hard at that.
Oh yeah, and the old bag. I mean, she was entertaining. I think the best bit with her was when when they had him like bound up and they went into that like cell a bit, and she was shouting through like the window, and like the guard is
Yes.
like, shut, go away, and she's like, mind your own business. And it's like, well, you're the one interfering in his business.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
yeah, she was an entertaining character, and I think every town square has one. The sort of hysterical sort of gossip type thing. So, although it was a little bit of a cliche, I think she was entertaining as well, and I can definitely see how there are characters like that. But no, I think in general, just things like that maybe stops it from being a total like 9 out of 10 sort of film. Also, maybe I agree with some of what Alyssa said. Maybe partly because it was a short film, things were sped up a bit too fast. Um, I think actually, although I really like that scene as well with the old guy, the blind person, that was very moving. I mean, scene the bit where the creature actually cried when he was in his arms. I mean, that was really moving stuff. It's
Yeah.
like finally he's found acceptance, sort of thing. But yeah, no, I think maybe that part of the film could have been a little bit longer because then you might have got a bit more sense of what he had taught him and you might have believed it a bit more. But I did like actually how when he went back out in the world, how you saw what he had learnt, sort of thing. You know, you sort of saw him how he was then, had the fix of drinking wine. So I have to say, good taste. Taste monster, but yeah, but how he actually learned and took that out in the world. But yeah, I mean, also this film, it's just really different, which I like about it. I actually really like the opening where you have the storyteller Mary Shelley, like because that's actually the opening of the film, and it's almost like an early form of being quite meta, where she's talking to the audience and she's sort of saying things like, I don't just want to tell the same old story again. I want to actually do something a bit different. So, yeah, for a film this far back to actually start with a scene like that, I thought was really interesting. And as well as it being a good horror movie, good use of like shadows and gothic and, yeah, for the time, especially good makeup effects. It did do a lot with the story. It made it a very sort of human story.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
as part of a sci-fi movie as well as a horror, it went back to the theme of hubris sort of thing. The when they built his sort of what they saw as his ideal sort of mate in a way, and it's almost like that other crazy doctor. He tried to justify it as saying, You've got this maniac roaming the countryside, so it's sort of like if I create the perfect female for him, that'll solve that problem. But it's almost like that's the way he justified it, but really it was his ego that he just wanted to create for the sake of creating just because he could, and lo and behold, it doesn't quite work out that easily. Yeah, I think it's a really interesting film. It's a really moving film at times. It's obviously an entertaining. There's some good campy moments as well, hammy moments, and Boris Karloff is so good in it. Like the physical, like performance. It's like I think you literally believe he is like literally half sort of human, half sort of like creature type thing. That's sort of the way he acts in the movie type thing. So yeah, he manages to be like menacing, but also bring a bit of heart to the role as well. So it's a really good sequel, I think.
Yeah, I definitely agree that as far as like sequels go, following up a very solid movie, it's definitely one of the best. You don't get very good many sequels that are as solid as this for sure.
Not many. I feel like Aliens kind of beats it out a little.
Yeah,
It's been a long
it,
time.
yeah,
I
it
love
probably
that movie.
does, but I sort of feel like maybe Aliens gets its due anyway, whereas maybe this film doesn't in
Yeah, this
some
one
ways.
definitely doesn't get near enough credit.
No.
And obviously, it's also worth saying this created the trend of the Bride of sort of film.
Yes,
well. But
definitely.
yeah, there would be no Bride of Chucky without Bride of Frankenstein sort of thing, and
Yeah.
so many other movies. So yeah, yeah.
Absolutely. So I personally give it a 6 with the potential of going higher. This was also a first watch for me. Um, I had some questions with the realism, which always brings my entertainment score down a little, because it just takes me out of the immersion a little bit. But the effects were amazing. The acting was great. It was very, very entertaining to watch. I will definitely watch it again. Um, it does feel a bit more like a tragedy at times than a horror movie, but they still bring that horror element to it with his acting and his look. So I really appreciated that. It was a very it was a movie full of heart, I feel like.
Yeah.
So they did a really, really good job with it. That scene with the blind man was just uh
Yeah, that's great.
Whenever I was watching it with you, I saw you tearing up. Like you were just completely
so
engrossed in that
sweet.
scene.
Yeah,
It was so sweet. He just completely accepted him. And the poor blind guy just wanted someone to talk to. He
Yeah.
just wanted a companion and someone to not be alone with.
Yeah.
And the creature felt so alone and ostracized by everyone. Everyone was terrified of him until this one guy was like, "A friend, please come in. I have food for you. I have drink. We can talk. You'll be safe here. You can stay as long as you want."
And so
And he
it,
just finally found almost a home.
yeah, like it
yeah,
kind of reminds me of the situations where it's like you have two outcasts in society, but whenever they meet, they end up seeing the person that they are. Like
Yes.
the blind man, even though he, literally couldn't see, is like you could also take it as he could see past the fact that it was a monster and just saw the human that he truly was.
Yeah, and even when the other villagers came for him, he tried to defend him, saying, "He's my friend. He won't hurt you. Like, there's nothing wrong with him.
Yeah.
He's been nothing but kind to me. Don't hurt him."
Yeah.
And the creature is in the movie is only ever really violent when fear and violence are shown to him first.
Yeah.
Because there are
yeah,
times when he tries to help, but when the other person starts screaming or displaying more violent behavior towards him, then he turns and is like, "Okay, fine.
yeah.
If you want me to be a monster, I'll be a monster."
Yeah.
kind of thing. So it was very sad, and you just really root for the creature,
Mm-hmm.
to be
Yeah.
perfectly honest. The other people made themselves out to be kind of the villains or the monsters in
Mm,
that aspect,
Mm-hmm.
and the creature was just it was so sad to watch.
yeah.
I really did enjoy this movie. It did give me some Pet Cemetery vibes, especially towards the end
Mm.
when
Okay.
he kept saying like we should have stayed dead or we should be dead.
Yeah.
It really reminded me of Pet Cemetery. Sometimes dead is better.
Well, I think it
They
Yeah.
just should have
plays.
left well enough alone.
I think it plays on
Mm,
similar themes because it's like
Hmm.
with Frankenstein, on the one hand, you have the dynamic on like how far should we push science, but then on the other hand, it's like, it's dealing with our own mortality and be like, well, if we could live forever, should we?
Hmm.
So I think it's kind of one of those dual theme type of movies where
Yeah.
it covers different like human fears and questions and things like that.
and ethics.
Yes.
Another thing which I thought was quite good about the stuff with the old man was, and it was actually a more positive representation of religion, because he was like religious, and a lot of times in films that can be quite negative and stereotypical, and it just seemed like, whether you're a believer or not, like what the old man stood for was just basic, like, human decency, really.
Yeah.
And that it's almost like, regardless, it felt like he wasn't someone, like, even if the person he takes in is non-religious, I got the impression he wouldn't judge that person. So it was just that core human value of, we should help those who need it, those less fortunate. So
Absolutely.
I thought it was quite nice to see that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like, instead of him representing religion necessarily, it's just him representing goodness and kindness.
Yeah.
Yeah. I did also take off a little bit from the entertainment scale for the fact that the bride was in there for all of 5 minutes.
Yeah.
It's called The Bride of Frankenstein, and she was in there for the last 5 minutes
That
of
was
the
pretty
movie.
surprising.
It was a
Yeah.
great movie, and I loved it, but let's get to the one that the movie is named for, shall we?
Yeah, I think that's maybe where, again, it could have been a bit longer and would have benefited it. Because you almost had the two halves where they had to balance it out and have, at least half of it with him out. Because obviously it follows on from the last movie. But yeah, like you said, you would think you would give at least half the movie to, at least the build-up. Because I guess
Yeah.
a lot of it was the build-up. And I did enjoy the build-up, all the sparks flying and stuff. And even though I'm sure the science of it is total BS, it sort of at least felt like entertaining, engaging science when they were going through it. So movie science, it sort of works, even though I'm sure it's total BS in reality. But
Movie's got a movie.
Movie's got a movie, but yeah, I wonder if, like, the stuff with making it the Bride of Frankenstein, like, maybe there's partly a meta thing there where it's like just saying, so used to, like, these narratives being dominated by male figures, so we're gonna even that up a little bit and introduce, like, a female and actually make her the name of the film. But yeah, so maybe if it was a later film, obviously they probably would have given more time to that character. But
Yeah, it's
one
like
of those things.
they almost needed a movie in between where it's like, the monster's going around, meets the blind man and realizes he can be accepted. That is a possible thing. And then him yearning for, whether it be a mate or a friend or whatever. And then have a movie that's focused on the bride or whatever. I don't know.
The creation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We did also look up the original story just to get some more background on it. I am a little surprised that they didn't go a little closer to the original story. There wasn't a second scientist in the original story, apparently. The creature actually came to Frankenstein and was like, if you create someone for me, someone else of my kind, specifically a woman, but someone else of my kind, then I will leave with them and you'll never hear from me again. So, like, the violence and chaos will end if you create a friend for me. And Frankenstein was very concerned that if he did create a woman for him, that they would repopulate. And there would be a bunch of monsters roaming the area, and it would be a bigger problem. So he struggled. He initially had agreed just to end the the violence that was ensuing from the original creation of the creature. But then he ended up backing out of his deal with the creature and not creating a second one. And the creature ended up, he said, fine, I'll be there on your wedding night, and ended up killing Frankenstein's bride on their wedding night.
Okay.
I feel it's like
Interesting.
I think for the name of The Bride of Frankenstein, that story makes more sense. But that's why I was kind of that's why I feel like the homophobia symbolism matches so well, because if you're thinking why they changed up the story, it makes the most sense that they were trying to convey some sort of other message, because it's like I hear that and I hear, you know, a story of loneliness, seeking friendship, but also revenge. Well, this one is more like he was ostracized, seeking friendship, and it was the townspeople that were more like the evil entity. So it just kind of gives a different mood towards the monster.
It does. So knowing that, it makes more sense why they changed it. I just kind of wish we had gotten that original story. I know it would have painted the creature in more of a negative light, but it would have been a bit more of a tragedy.
Yeah.
Yeah, like maybe because at this point in like film history, like quite brave enough to go with a full blown that sort of message. Maybe like maybe it's just enough. Then you can pick these themes out of it, and it's there. But yeah, it would have been certainly a different movie. Like it probably would have had to been a longer movie if they did that story.
Probably.
I think that's one of the balances of adapting.
Most likely. They were there for the longest time afraid to make a movie too long. They felt like the audience didn't have the attention span.
Yeah.
In recent years, we've obviously proved that a lie.
Hey, those 4-hour movies, they lose me pretty quick. It depends on the movie, though. Like they have to do it really well.
Movie. But I can think of a couple examples. One of them being like the Lord of the Rings movies. I will happily sit there the entire time. Nobody bug me. I am invested in this.
My biggest memory with that movie is seeing it in theaters and feeling like I had to go to the bathroom like 4 or 5 times during the movie. But it's like, and I couldn't just sit through the rest. I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna die. So that's all I remember is seeing it in theaters and just remembering that it felt like I was going to the bathroom like so many times during the movie.
No. Our family planned for this. We didn't drink much for that, the beginning part of the day. And we got just a medium kind of drink.
You dehydrated yourself for a movie.
Basically, and we just sipped on it throughout the movie. We didn't have like big drinks or anything because we knew how long this movie was gonna be.
That's a good plan. I get that. But for a minute, I thought Jess was going to say she wanted those movies to be longer, which was a bit scary. But
I would have been fine if they made it like a TV series, so they could stretch it out and have a bit more in it. But the movies were good. The books make a bit more sense. I'm starting to read it. I couldn't really get into it before, but now that I've seen them so many times, I just love it, and I'm starting to read them and get into them. The books definitely make more sense. The first movie, especially Fellowship of the Ring, feels a little bit rushed. But movies got a movie.
Even at 3 hours.
Yes. And it's mostly at the beginning, and it's because I always questioned why Bilbo had the ring for decades and was perfectly fine, and then Frodo gets it and immediately starts to turn.
Yeah.
and have issues with it.
Yeah.
So they explain it a lot better in the book.
Yeah, they planned for
There's
a
a
while.
lot more time
Well,
in between when he gets the ring and when they
I'm
leave.
not sure I can be bothered with those books. I think the films were fine.
See,
Those books, I just imagine there's a whole chapter about Gandalf's beard, basically.
yeah, like I might
No, but there's a lot of singing.
I might have some hate comments, but I have the hardest time reading the Lord of the Ring books. Like, they're just so slow and boring because he's like going into the linguistics. I'm just like, I don't care. Like, I applaud you for, being a professor in, that subject. And obviously you have a lot of knowledge, but please, can we stick to the story? So I actually had to listen to the audiobooks, and the audiobooks made it so much more palatable.
Yeah, I'm actually listening to the audiobook. Again, there's a lot of singing, a lot more than I expected.
But
but it's a good story so far.
We're digressing a bit,
I'll
though.
give
Yes,
it
we
a
are.
go one time. Yeah, well, I was going to say, this is the deleted scene. You'll have to cut this out and make it a bonus, like on the DVD.
Totally fine.
Or just put in the title in brackets, extra Lord of the Rings, scatter, something.
Like bonus content.
Yeah.
Bonus content, yeah.
Lord of the Rings talk. So that's what I had for entertainment, though, for Bride of Frankenstein.
Yeah, I just love the idea of someone putting this review on at the point where we're talking about Lord of the Rings and being just perplexed. Did I click on the wrong video?
So I'm gonna go ahead and kick us off on realism. So for realism, I would give this a 2. Are you okay?
Yeah, one of my dogs just had the zoomies for a moment. It's fine.
Oh, okay. So for realism, I would give this a 2. The reason being is there are certain, like the whole situation with the townspeople trying to attack the monster, and then the whole like human connection of like wanting to be accepted, wanting a friend, things like that. Obviously, those are very realistic, and it adds a lot of depth to the movie. But the thing that very much took me out in the immersion, and I mean, this is, to be fair, this is pretty common with a lot of older movies. But the acting, especially like the townsfolk, is just like way over the top. Like so over the top. That's just like ridiculous. And it just makes it more like funny. Like the one woman like running hysterically, screaming.
I love it. Alyssa missed that the first time. I had to back it up so she could see it.
You've got to see that. Yeah.
And then, there's also odd choices, like they're saying, oh, Henry is, they, instead of Victor Frankenstein, it's Henry Frankenstein, which was kind of a weird change. But, they're like, oh, he's dead. But then they're like so surprised that he woke up. It's like, you don't see them check a pulse. You don't really see them attempting to verify that he is dead. They just assume, oh, he's not responding. He must be dead.
He dead.
Yeah. It's like, at that period of time, they would have known that a pulse is like something that you can check to verify whether or not a person...
Check if he's breathing.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think, if I remember right, and I could be wrong, but I think a pulse was something that they would typically check. But, if you are in a coma or unconscious to a point, it can be a little bit more difficult to find a pulse. And so that's where you come with the fear of people getting buried alive, because they're like, oh, we can't feel a pulse, so they must be dead. And then they go ahead and bury them. And unpleasant for that person to deal with. But and then of course the possibility of not only mixing body parts, but also bringing someone back from the dead. It's like, first, the mixing the body parts, we know about blood types now. We know that even if a blood type matches, your body knows that there is something wrong, that there's some sort of foreign object, which is why people that have organ transplants have to take drugs to keep their bodies from, attacking that new organ. So it's like that in and of itself just wouldn't work. And then secondly, of course, just bringing someone back from the dead. It's like we now know that after a certain point, your brain, you go through a process where it's practically, maybe sometime in the distant future, we might be able to bring someone back if we, preserve them right after death or whatever. But at least right now with our current technology, there's no way that that's going to happen. So, but yeah. I guess you could also say the fact that, would you really want to bring someone back from the dead? Because especially like what happens with the monster, this goes back to, if you should versus like if you could, but it's like the monster obviously was miserable, not just because the townspeople were, trying to attack him, but also he looked at his reflection and he did not recognize himself. It's like it would be terrifying for your brain to be put in a different body and you wake up and you're like, I have no idea who I am. Like the perception of myself does not match my body. Like that's just a terrifying thought. So which can technically lead to some current things that we're dealing with in our society with other
dysphoria.
Yeah. But so yeah, that's my take. It's like some realistic things, but a lot of just the over the topness and things like that. I'm like, and the science, I'm like, nope, not gonna happen. But
yeah, okay. I'll go a little bit higher, but not much higher. I'll go 3 for realism. So the sort of like basic reactions around the town, I can believe that even nowadays, maybe even more so because of the way media whips it up, but then maybe it would happen that way. It was definitely exaggerated, and it was like to the point where no one seemed to be stopping and thinking. But obviously, especially if you're saying it's a story from that far back, I can sort of believe that. So the reactions, although definitely heightened and quite cartoony, I think the actual hysteria I can believe would sort of happen. And that old woman, one other thing to say about her is, as I said before, I think it's just the sort of character every town sort of has.
yeah.
So one thing that I give it for realism on her is the fact that they did just dismiss her as, and obviously it turned out she was telling the truth, but it's almost that thing of, I can imagine she's the sort of character who cries wolf all the time and comes up with these things all the time. And I don't know, that just reminds me a bit of like small towns and like maybe people who are like regular drunks or people who don't have a lot of a life. Yeah, gossip type. So it's almost like she's like an early version of like a town sort of gossip. So yeah, the fact that they just dismissed her as like, shut up, you old bag sort of thing. It's like, I can sort of see why they would really. So that actually rang quite true. So yeah, a lot of the science I think is what I would call like quasi-science. It's almost like a shortcut for science, a movie sort of shortcut, which sort of sounds quite engaging, sounds quite exciting, but if you pick it apart, it's obviously like nonsense. So there's a lot of practical issues. I don't know what you guys thought about the scene with like the the characters in the glass cases.
Oh,
That was
yeah.
pretty.
Yes.
That was
That was
weird.
really random, wasn't it?
Yeah.
It was extremely random.
It's like, okay, different movie now at the
Yeah,
moment.
I'm glad you mentioned that. I was going to.
Yeah, I completely
Okay,
forgot
fair.
about that. Yeah, because it's like I know, like in this current day and age, we've been able to essentially put the formula for life in like a lab and isolate it and be like, oh yeah, there is life spawning, but it's like single-celled organisms. It's not like many people.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I quite enjoyed that scene just because of how goofy it was, but it was like, yeah, no way. And it was almost just a scene, I think, just for him to show what he could do to the other scientists. It was like, well, I can do this, and sort of here's the proof. Look at my work, sort of thing. It was almost that sort of scene, I think. But yeah, because when I rewatched it, because I'd seen it before, and that scene started, I thought, oh yeah, this scene. I forgot this scene happened. What's going on? But yeah, no, I think there was a lot of, like, as I said, quasi sort of science. I think, although, as I said, like, Boris Karloff is so good in it, some of the action scenes looked very sort of like fake and phony, you know, a lot of just, you know, him going over a cliff or him throwing people over a cliff or just
The rag doll that he threw
Yeah, the
over
rag
the
doll.
side of the
Yeah.
castle. Yes.
It's like, yeah, it's just a product of its time. It's
Yeah.
like, it's a bit like the 60s Star Trek show where they have those fights where it's like, no one has ever fought like this in their life. Sort of thing.
Yeah.
You know, if you're enjoying the show and stuff, you just give it a pass, really. But yeah, I thought at times some of those scenes took me a bit out of the realism. So a lot of it, when I was following like Monster and stuff, I was into what was happening with his character and the general like premise. But yeah, the fight scenes took me out of it, as did some of, as I said, like some of the supporting characters. I agree. It's almost like they cast a few good actors, and then the rest, standard of acting after that wasn't very good.
Pull
Yeah.
them off the street. Anyone available?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. But and I couldn't really give two craps about, you know, the romantic plot. You know, the guy and his newlywed.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
sort of belongs in a different movie.
Yeah.
And it sort of made me wonder if they were trying to make them into like sympathetic, but it's just it was just done in a very sort of cheesy, soapy sort of way. So yeah, that's where I fall on realism.
So I'm going to take it one step lower than Alyssa. and
I
go
knew
one-
it. I knew it. Nothing can please you anymore.
It's just wrong. The interactions between the different people, while some are a little heightened, are fairly accurate, and I can see a lot of those happening. But everything else is kind of a no for me. The science behind it is just completely far-fetched. We didn't until recently have the technology to transplant a head and it be actually functional and be able to move the body. Like, they could have done it and it could have survived, but they would have been paralyzed and wouldn't have been able to move their limbs because the force needed to sever between certain vertebrae and the spinal cord is too much using previous methods, and it would have damaged it too much. And also the time it takes to do that process, they didn't really have a way of doing that without it damaging it further until recently. So in the 30s, this would have been a big nope.
Well, I think this takes place before the 30s.
I think even that, yeah. So
yeah,
they
it's
were
the 1800s, I believe.
they were very
Yeah,
optimistic for it, and it did not. It would not have worked. and using dead body parts that have been dead for a while. I don't care how fresh you got them. They were in a crypt.
Yeah.
So a lot of the parts that they were gathering are not so fresh.
Yeah.
And they likely would have been decayed beyond use and would have been rejected immediately, even if their scientific process actually did give life. Which electricity will move different parts of the body out of reflex and all. It would stimulate the muscles to expand and contract, but it wouldn't actually give life.
Yeah.
So, big nope there. I'm also so confused about how the second scientist said that he was a philosophy doctor, but the philosophy doctor was able to create mini humans and help on the experiment to create the female creature.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a completely different field of study.
My mind, yeah.
Yeah.
Also just the mini humans were a big no. I was so confused in that entire scene. Just that's not how any of it works. And he was sitting there saying that he grew them like from a seed.
Like plants, yeah.
Yeah, that's not how it works. That's not how any of it works.
That would be a good extra, though, watching them slowly grow.
Yes.
Like him watering them every so often.
And then they just have these all different personalities and everything.
Oh my god, it's kind of like
was it like the queen, the king?
Yes.
Yes.
Various. Like, what is this thing?
The archbishop.
That reminds it's kind of like they were grown like a Thumbelina, if you've seen that
Yes.
movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, it just I don't know what they were trying to bring into it, but that's just it was more confusing and detracted from the story more than anything.
Yeah,
they
and it's
also
just like he just accepted it too much,
Yeah.
like too
Yeah.
easily. Like
Yeah.
even if you buy he could do this, it's still a big step up to actually like create, you know.
he just accepted it. Like this is a thing that happened, and
Yeah.
this is a thing that can happen. So this is fine.
And then the fact that he kept them in jars,
Yes,
like that's so morally
like they'd be able to
wrong.
breathe
Yeah.
You know.
or thrive.
Yeah.
This is fine.
Yeah,
see
and
rants on
just-
fish tanks that are too small for that argument.
And just the logic, then they seem to be acting like they're real like kings and queens and
Yeah.
stuff like that. It wouldn't work like that, you know.
No.
They've literally just been created. You know, how would he implant that sort of character into them?
Yeah.
No idea, unless he had been doing this for like several decades prior and taught them to act like that. So it just it didn't make sense at all. There was also toward the end a scene where the second doctor is like, I have a phone you can use, and brings out this box that's not connected to anything. And it's a wireless phone. But it works. I questioned that pretty hardcore. Because while phones were a thing in 1935, even though the movie is, I believe, based way earlier,
yeah,
they still didn't have wireless technology at the time. It would have had to have been connected to something.
Yeah.
So,
Was it? I thought Frankenstein was in the Victorian era.
I believe so. So phones wouldn't have even been a thing. But again, even if they were.
But isn't that Victorian era like in the last half of the 1800s? I might be... Okay. I might be...
Right. Because I'm assuming...
Again, if it was, though, they wouldn't have had wireless technology, which is my point.
Was this film in the 50s? 40s or 50s, wasn't it? This film. But then obviously the original novel obviously dates further back.
Well, it's like it came out in 1935, but I'm pretty sure
Okay.
based off of
I'm gonna look it up.
please hold. But it's like based off of like their clothing and the
Perfect,
technology, it made it sound like it was supposed to be before the 30s.
Yeah.
Okay. So if it was Victorian era, that was 1837 through 1901. So the latter
Ha-ha!
half of it would have been there. But
Yeah.
again, my point remains they didn't have wireless technology.
Yes, yes.
Quit getting hung up on the other thing, Alyssa.
That was Alyssa. That was me. I was nodding away.
Just so that way we have a clear like distinction for the listeners and myself.
Okay.
I think I'm pretty fair to both sides, really.
Yeah.
I'll even
So-
it up in a minute.
Apparently, I just got a message from honorary tea sipper Chris Brown.
He's eavesdropping. That's not
little
allowed.
bit. He's apparently the first cordless phone model to ever have existed was invented in the 1950s by Thomas
Man.
Carter. So that idea was, 20 years before 15, 20 years before the actual thing was invented. So no.
But then, how would they know to put it in the movie then, if it hadn't even been like
It was an
have
idea.
a phone in? No, I guess. Maybe it wasn't a phone.
We've had
It was like
ideas
in the
of flying cars for years, and we haven't created those quite yet.
Yeah.
And spaceships.
That's true. I
We have
think I
barely
would learn to
functional
drive
spaceships.
if there was flying cars.
I'm waiting for the autonomous vehicles to come out. I'm excited about those.
We don't have a spaceship that can get us to Mars safely yet.
Yeah.
But yes, those were the main things. The biggest thing was just the science behind all of it. It just wouldn't have worked. And even if they were able to get a pulse and consciousness, which is no, the creature wouldn't have lasted because the parts were so decayed and likely different blood types, and it would have just been completely rejected and they would have broken down.
Yeah.
So no.
Plus,
I might
I
have to
can't.
change my rating now.
Plus, it's like
I
I
might have
can't.
to change it to a 2.
Yay, twinsies!
Well done, Jeff.
Come to the dark side.
But man, it's like, being brought back, especially like under those circumstances, I can't imagine like the suffering
No.
that person probably would have to go through if for them
Yeah.
to not like live that much longer,
Well, even if, like in the movie, they were able to continue on just fine with no issues, even if they had the best possible optimistic outlook in their mentality, it still would have been extremely confusing and disorienting to be in an unfamiliar body.
Yeah.
You're likely a different height, a different build.
Mm.
And your limbs aren't going to work quite the same as you're used to.
Yeah.
Not to mention the fact that every time you look in the mirror, someone completely different is looking back.
Yeah, that's the real horror scenario
Yes.
for me, is being
Absolutely.
the monster.
Stuff,
Yeah.
Another, just on basic thing on realism is, also I thought it was really crappy the way they tried to restrain him. Like, the actual device, it was, really weak. It's
Yeah.
It's neck wasn't really attached properly, wasn't really pinned. It was, a couple of, chains, but I think they were further down the body, so... Yeah, he wasn't really crammed in very hard, and it was and then they just did that sloppy movie thing of walking away. Okay, we'll come back later.
Yeah.
And then they're surprised when he escapes in the next instance. Well,
Yeah.
you should have chained him in harder. I know, obviously, you're going to do Creature from the Black Lagoon, and there's even a worse example in that.
Oh no.
You know,
Well, no
okay, so
spoilers.
you
We haven't
got
seen
to-
it yet.
Okay, there's even worse example in that. But,
Yeah, so in this one though, like he was tied to a post when they were moving him, and the ropes held him just fine, but chains
Yeah.
didn't.
Yeah.
yeah, good point. Is it
What kind of
because
ropes were they using?
true, but was he unconscious at that point? Because that might have made a difference.
No, I think
Not-
he was awake.
Yeah,
Was
he was awake
Ah, okay.
But I
because
think
they were
also,
holding him down with pitchforks and things in the wagon.
I think
Yeah.
also depends on the technology because, you know, you at that time period, I don't think they had as pure of metal. So there's a lot of contaminants that maybe made the metal a lot weaker. And rope in and of itself is pretty difficult. Like, I don't know if you've ever like wrapped your hair in like a braid or whatever. That's going to be a lot stronger than just like an individual strand. And I can picture, depending on the purity of the metal or how many contaminants the chains had, it might be possible that the rope would be stronger. But that would still like leave to question, well, why wouldn't they just tie ropes around him instead of chains?
Also, I would believe that also a little bit more if the ropes weren't rather loose
Yeah, they
on
were
that
pretty loose.
post.
Yeah,
He could have shimmied out of it, to be perfectly honest.
that's true. That is very true.
So,
Yeah, could have gave them the middle finger on the way out. So
a little bit, yeah.
screw you. Um,
So, but that's what I got for realism.
Okay.
We were able to pull Keith to the dark side a little bit. Change his mind.
yeah, like 'cause probably for me, 3 was quite, lenient, but it was probably a bit less than I would normally have. But
Yeah.
I'm harsh on realism though, always.
And entertainment,
people are
though.
different, aren't they?
Your entertainment tends to be pretty low. I'm just like, dang.
Well, I mean, most of them are kind of middle ground. I reserve the high ratings for the ones that I'm going back to every time if given the chance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we've watched some not so great ones lately.
Oh yeah.
But
And I mean, for a first-time watch, I guess 6 out of
Yeah.
10 is a solid score. And,
Especially for the time period that it was created. This was a good movie. And again, it has the potential of in the future of gaining higher ratings, but on a first watch, that's my first impression of it.
yeah. Okay.
So,
yeah, it's like overall, I think that if someone has not watched this movie yet, that this isn't one to sleep on. Like, I think it is worth the watch because not only is the film itself good, but it's really cool to see how far we've come since then and how much influence we continue to take from these classics.
definitely.
Yeah.
So, but thank you everyone for joining us today, and please comment on what you thought of the movie. And Keith is also bored now on YouTube, and I will link his information. I will.
She's gonna link his podcast information.
In the description below. Yeah, like, okay, the first, I did say link, but it just, I didn't do the end, like, long enough, but the inside is like, let me, clarify that one. But anyways, if you'd like to recommend a movie, game, or tea and keep up to date with our content, you can find us on YouTube, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and most places you listen to podcasts.
And if you'd like to support the podcast, please subscribe, like, and share our content and Keith's as well at Board Now. And we will also have a Teespring and PayPal donate button available, and our, of course, affiliate link with Plum Deluxe if you'd like to support us monetarily. And our affiliate link does not affect the price of the tea at all. It just allows us to continue to do what we love. You can find all the sites mentioned linked below, along with Keith's podcast down below. But until the next time, guys, stay safe and stay spoopy.
Bye.
Bye, guys.